I'm Claire Williamson. I'm the host of Inspire Local Business Person and Mortgage Advisor, and today we've got Christian with us representing Piso, who's going to come up and say a few words about our awesome guest, Hamish.
Yes. Evening guys, my name is Christian. I'm the Logistics Manager at Vision Complete Earthworks, aka Piso's cousin as well. The big man couldn't be here, so he asked me to step in for him. VC is very proud tonight to sponsor the Inspire event. And at VC, we believe that strength comes from standing together and supporting each other, not only through the good times, but also through the challenging times. And Stronger Together, as you can see on the board and on the banner over there, is an ethos that extends beyond personal success to include fostering stronger businesses, communities, and individuals. And with that, tonight it's my pleasure to welcome and introduce you to Hamish Carter. Hamish is an Olympic gold medalist in triathlon, having achieved glory at the 2004 Summer Olympics. With a remarkable career in both sport and business, Hamish brings a wealth of experience and insight to the speaking stage. Following his athletic triumphs, Hamish transitioned into the corporate world, contributing his expertise to renowned organizations such as Xero and Lion. His journey then continued at High Performance Sport New Zealand, where he led the performance planning team, driving excellence and innovation in elite sport. And currently, Hamish serves as the head of people and culture at Enlighten Design, a Hamilton-based IT technical agency. And in this role, he leverages principles from high performance sport to develop and nurture highly effective teams, fostering a culture of excellence and collaboration. And with that, can you please welcome Hamish to the stage with me, guys.
We are so lucky to have Hamish with us today, so thank you very much for making the journey down from Auckland.
Who wrote the intro? That was a good intro. I was impressed about myself.
It wasn't me, you can't give me the kudos, it wasn't me. So I think probably most of us know you as a triathlete, and I actually think, to be honest, that your sport was one of the most difficult sports, because I've tried triathlon and it's pretty bloody hard to be good at all three of those things. And I think the image we all have of you is winning that gold medal with the wreath around your head in Athens. But we actually had a bit of a chat a couple of days ago, and we explored some of the things that Hamish learned through his sporting career. And I think one of the biggest ones was what he refers to as a shit sandwich, which was his journey from Sydney in 2000, where things were pretty damn tough, to being at the pinnacle of the sport in 2004 in Athens. So I'm going to start there with a bit of a sporting story. So do you want to talk us through that time, what you did and what challenges you had and how you kind of overcame them?
Sure. That's I'll try and keep the answer short. I guess so. The Sydney Olympics for me was in my professional career was going to be my rival at everything I wanted to achieve, and I approached that race in a certain way where I felt that, to be successful, you effectively have to turn up on a given day and produce something magical and special beyond anything you've ever practiced before. I turned up in Sydney and it went terribly wrong because, for lots of reasons, my preparation wasn't good enough. I had the wrong people around me. My approach to planning was wrong. I didn't understand the event I was in, even though I thought I had all these things figured out. And so essentially the disappointment of finishing 26th in Sydney, I got back to New Zealand, and the first thing that happened was this reporter came up to me, and I'd just come through the arrivals hall and said, look, the taxpayers invested millions of dollars into you to win a medal, and you've gone to Sydney and you've completely failed. How do you feel?
And you went, don't talk to me.
Yeah. So, but the point of that story is that it took that dire situation for me to rethink everything that I thought about what it took to succeed. I actually realised from that event that from the real difficult challenges that we face, and when things do go horribly wrong, those are the very opportunities that we've actually got to embrace and almost seek out, because without them, we never really get the chance to be as good as we possibly can. And I think the point is that when you set really difficult goals as a business or an individual, if you don't expect it to go wrong and you can't respond skillfully, then you just don't ever get the chance to actually grow from the setbacks you're going to fail. So the setbacks should actually become, they're not a positive thing, but they're a necessary aspect of what it takes to be truly successful. And it's how you respond in those moments that I think really, really matters.
So what was the rebuild? Like, what did that look like for you? Because I think, hitting rock bottom, it's almost hard to know when you've got there. So what did that look like in a sporting context, and kind of what did you learn that you've then been able to kind of use heading forward in your more commercial career?
Yeah, the biggest thing that we started off with is my coach sat down with me and he looked at me and he said, why didn't you win? And got me thinking about what was really good about the race, which is a really hard thing to do, because when it feels awful and you don't want to ever face it, he pushed me back into the difficult feelings and the emotion of it all, and made me sit in it and think about what we could possibly learn from this event. And so what he was doing was essentially turning me into more of a expert learner. So in my Sydney campaign, learning didn't play a role within my campaign, but what we did for Athens was we had a really structured and effective way that we would learn from every time we did something. So we had this mechanism of constant improvement. And it's not that you need to learn one big thing on one day and that's it. It's got to be built in and baked into everything you do. So we had 4 more years we tried to outlearn the competition. So we were constantly looking at stuff, trying stuff, breaking stuff, and learning from it. And so that was a really, really big part of my success 4 years later. And that wasn't pretty either, because you've still got to go through a whole lot of challenges. But as soon as you get more comfortable in the process of applying yourself to embracing the failure and learning from it, then applying that into what you do next, it's such a powerful aspect to improve on whatever you're trying to achieve. So that was one of the biggest changes that we made.
Yeah. And I think too, like when you're in sport and you're obviously also competing in this time as well, right, during this time period, are you kind of getting sort of messy gains, like gains in time, or gains because you've obviously got 3 different disciplines here as well? Are you getting gains each time and then going, hey, actually how can we do this completely differently? Or are you just like, hey, I'm going to be the fittest I've ever been?
I think there's about a couple of things. First of all, it's being clear about what your goals really are, and a lot of the time we set goals that we don't have a lot of control over, and that's not always great. Or if you set a goal, you've actually got to break it down into something you can actually affect outcome of. And that takes a little bit of thought, and you've really got to think about that. The second part of it is that really important in high-performing teams is this thing of psychological safety, which sounds a bit weird, right? Because people will go to work or they'll be in a sports team and they'll go, I don't feel unsafe. But the point is that this is the other thing that we implemented, is that you have to be able to speak up without fear of being ridiculed or shot down or whatever. So you've got to be able to get it said. And so we created sessions within my campaign team where we had meetings where we'd say, this is about getting it said. And so we had to address some really ugly truths early on. But if we don't uncover them early enough, then they'll appear when you go to perform in a race or when you get into a critical moment. So creating an environment of trust, particularly when things are breaking, is really difficult. They kind of tug of war on each other. But I think I think it's the basis for achieving really, really difficult things. And that was, again, all of this for me is what try to relate between what you see in sport and what businesses are trying to do. It's a little bit different, but there's good crossover, I think.
We're also living in a bit of a world at the moment where I think there's more pressure, and that pressure then equates to stress for a lot of us, right? So if we're thinking about business or we're thinking about our jobs, that's often quite a high pressure situation. You going into Athens, having had quite a lot of challenges in Sydney, having had that cool as reporter ask you that question when you got back to New Zealand, How did you deal with the pressure? Like, what were sort of some techniques, I suppose, or even just like literally, what did you do to make sure that when you started that race, it was going to end well?
I don't think you can manage pressure. I think you've got to learn to live with it. I think as soon as you think there's a strategy, there isn't. I don't reckon. I mean, you've got to accept the fact that when you feel that pinch in your gut or you're nervous, there's a good reason for it, and so it's actually just letting it occur, and then figuring out how do you be super effective when you feel that way, because often that our ambition gets in our own way. So you've got to sort of separate those things, and that's where, in sport in particular, if you can focus in on delivering what you need to do to perform well, again, those are things you can control. Whereas we generally get nervous and scared when we're trying to control a whole lot of stuff we have no control over, which naturally is stressful. So if you can be disciplined to stick into the stuff that matters and eliminate the rest, I think it gives you a sense of way more control over what you're trying to do. But when you start to control something, so focus on something that you do have control over, it just gives you a lot more confidence. And yeah, if you can rely on the other people around you to do the same thing, this is where you can you rely on each other to because you're going to get bumped off course, so you've got to be able to come back. So I think those things are really important as well.
Yeah, and that comes back to the trust in the team as well, right? Because if you're, and again, if you sort of move it into the business space, if you've got something that's really, you've got a strong focus on achieving something, and then everyone does their job, that is going to help you achieve more. So I suppose that's probably what happened for you in Sydney.
Say that again.
Sorry, not.
You mean Athens?
In Athens, yeah.
Yeah, I think it's like I said at the start, like instead of trying to turn up and produce something phenomenal and special on a given day, I realised that that's not the business that sport is, and I don't think it's the business that most businesses are. And I think what it is, it's always about consistency. So if you can prepare at a high enough level so that you just replicate your preparation to your performance, that's doable, right? Like, that's not scary, because I've practiced this 100 times. If I can replicate that in a race, I should be able to win. So a high standard of consistent behaviour will produce phenomenal results, particularly if you topspin it with learning and trust and discipline. Those things really start to add up and give you that momentum. And so you're not sort of turning up trying to go and have to be the best in the world today. Nah, I've prepared the best. I just now need to replicate what I've done. Even if I'm just delivering slightly below what I've prepared, it's still probably going to be better than someone's hoping for on a whim and a prayer they're going to deliver something phenomenal just because they want to. It doesn't work like that.
Yeah, we talked a little bit the other day too, right, about consistency and discipline, and the fact that it's actually really boring and actually quite hard to be consistently doing that stuff. What do you think about that? Because I think that's quite hard in a world where people want like heaps of variety, right?
I get asked a lot about the last 800 metres of the race where I broke away from Bevan, and people kind of go, it must be like there's chariots of fire playing in your head, and there's an orchestra playing music beside the road where you're just all emotional and there's goosebumps and it's the opposite. It's ridiculously clinical. You're just focused in on what you've practiced, and you're trying to block out all that other stuff which just gets in the way. And generally when we get super emotional, which is a really good trait to have, we're generally less effective. Not to say you want to be a robot, you want a balance of this, right? But it is boring, and but that's what makes it awesome when you achieve something great, because you've stuck to a plan, you've been really disciplined, you've avoided the distractions, but you're growing and learning along the way. And you can rely on the people you're working with so that you're not feeling under threat, and that gives you the confidence to really push it and realise that if it doesn't work, that's an opportunity to learn and grow from it. So all these things I think are in the mix when you're trying to, when you're setting a goal that's almost unachievable in business or in sport, and actually setting on a journey to getting there.
So winning something is more about like, that's just another day at the office, I'm all good.
I think it is, yeah. I think it's yeah, as I said, it's less about something that is just miraculously occurs. It's something you've practiced over and over again, and you shouldn't ever expect to be better than what your daily practice is. So that's as good as it is. So make that as good as it can be, and then that's the standard in which you're trying to maintain.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. I'm going to move a little bit into your kind of commercial career now, because I think what I found really interesting when I was doing a bit of research on you was that you've actually got quite a special interest in connecting athletes, or particularly even people that have come out of being successful sports people, into the commercial space and into connecting with businesses and obviously finding ways in which they can then contribute. So talk to us a little bit about that journey, because I think it's quite interesting to then go, hey, this sports person or this athlete's got a great personality, or they've got a certain set of skills, and how do you kind of connect that in with a business, and what does that look like, or even just some examples?
Yeah, I think when you become super specialised in an area, that's cool, but you've got to exist in the world, right? So you've got to find some way to balance that out. And particularly for an athlete, if they can engage with a sponsor and get to learn their business and understand what they're trying to do and how their success can help the business grow, it's a win-win for both, because the business will get to learn a lot from the athlete, and the athlete will learn a lot about what is the workplace and commercial reality of what this business is trying to achieve and how can I help them. It also is great for the athlete because it gets them out of their own head, and because you do get stuck in a world where, you know, I'm up here for 45 minutes talking about myself, so I can start to feel like I'm amazing and everything I say is true, and you've got whole teams around you trying to make you amazing, and everything you say is awesome, but it's not true. Like, you just know one little bit about one little thing, and you've got to grow yourself beyond that, because you can't really exist in a vacuum. So, and that's where I think we talked before about the alignment of values between what an athlete stands for and what a business stands for is a really, really great place to start, because there's just so much synergy and crossover there. It's awesome.
Yeah, and I think from a business perspective as well, like I know personally we've employed a couple of athletes, Olympic athletes, and I know there's a bit of a challenge when you've been an athlete for a long time. Like these two had been over 10 years of existing in that environment. And then it's like, cool, what do I do now? You know, and so having those relationships into those businesses is really important. But also I'm interested in my view anyway, athletes have an incredible set of skills in terms of their ability to stick with stuff, their discipline. And we talked before about taking feedback really well. So how do we translate that into businesses? You know, like how do we build that in our teams?
Yeah, that's a good one. First up, like anytime you're about to receive feedback, you get that crunch, right? It's like, okay, what's gonna come? And again, as soon as you feel discomfort, I think for me there's always a natural curiosity. What's there? Like, how do I lean into that and be interested in that? And then I think that for me, I guess as I said before, the importance of having the opportunity to learn and learn more about yourself and getting that from the people that you spend time with is just so valuable, because great leadership, effectiveness, it all comes with self-awareness, and so we don't always know ourselves as well as we think we do. We've all got massive blind spots. We can be awesome at some things and not that good at other things. So I think a lot of businesses probably do have great mechanisms of providing feedback, but it's not about the process, it's not even about the timing, it's just about the quality of someone taking the time and the care to tell you something that's going to make you awesome. and that's got to be prepared and delivered skillfully, and you've got to be willing and open to accept it and then do something about it. So I think it's the basis it's the best place to start for learning more about yourself and then figuring out what can I do to get better. And yeah, it's a two-way thing. It's just such a crucial part, I think. I mean, in the sport, I guess you get used to it. I think you're used to a coach standing there, not always getting that ratio of 3 nice things and 1 thing you're not doing that well. And they're generally saving time, so they're like, you're just not doing that well, and you've got to do it better. But again, that's where that safety is so important, because you can feel uncomfortable, but if you feel safe and you're in a place to grow, then I think it's far more embraced and an opportunity to be, encourage it and seek it out and want to do something about it.
Yeah, and I think too, like, I've always had this thought of, if someone's giving me feedback and I love and trust them, or we're in a business together and they care about my growth or the outcomes, taking it as you're not good enough at the moment is actually just a really kind of immature way to take it. So I think having that attitude of how can I always be better, that continuous learning thing that we talked about before, is kind of a feature of positive culture, right? So this is now your role in your current role in terms of supporting people and culture. What things are you doing in that business to build that really positive relationship between people?
Well, I've got some colleagues here, so I'll be there.
Taking notes.
Yeah. Think a lot about the way in which we can create opportunities for these great conversations to happen. On one hand, there's a process. You can start a process, and we do that in like designs. We do feedback cycles, and that's cool. That happens. I think it's deeper than that. When you've got it really nailed it, it almost happens whenever it happens. People feel comfortable to do it, and they just do it because they value it, and people expect it. So if I've done something, I would expect someone to say, "Hey, by the way, this wasn't that great, and this is what you could do differently." So it's awesome. But again, when you practice something, you get better at it, and so there should be opportunities to practice it, and there's lots of ways you can do it, I think. But I think you've got to be purposeful about the way you approach it, and realise that it's not always going to be great, and not all people are going to be comfortable, and it's going to take a little bit of time to really embed that as a cultural thing. But I think trying to do it and making it a way of life is, I'm on a mission to do that, because I just think I know how powerful it can be. And when that can occur, it shifts people to amazing places. And when you get emotion involved, then you know you've really got close to something magical. When it's a bit dry and clinical, you got to feel something.
Yeah, and that's what builds the connection between people too, right? And I think you see it in like high-performing organisations or high-performing teams where people just give a shit about everyone else, right? And that helps everybody move forward, which is awesome. I want to touch a little bit on adversity and challenge. I looked up an article, actually, something came up when I was doing some research around High Performance Sport New Zealand, when you guys had a couple of challenges in that space. And obviously we don't need to delve into the details, but what I'm interested in is, how do you deal with situations where, and particularly when they're quite public situations, where something just hasn't gone right? How do you deal with that positively and get a really good outcome at the end of it?
Yeah, I think step one is, I think our natural response is defend ourselves in those situations. I think the step one, unless you embrace it and own it, you can't gain from it. So step one is you've got to own it. And even if you had a big part or a small part to play, it is something you've just got to own up and take responsibility for. I think the second thing is that you got to let yourself sit in there and feel it, because that's, again, there's so much momentum you can gain from it if you're willing to embrace what's happened. And then I think it's a case of moving on and learning from the mistakes of whatever they've been made. The worst thing is when it is, you're pushing it off somewhere else, and then you've missed it. You've missed the opportunity to do something with it. So anything that's hard to do or that's worth doing, the only guarantee is that it is not going to go well. You can guarantee that's the truth, right? So you should almost expect things to go wrong, and be set up that you can respond skillfully when they do go wrong. And then when things go right, you're just killing it. But essentially, if you're trying to do something hard and you're expecting it to go well, you probably have missed something. And unfortunately, that's what I think we're all trying to do, like hard stuff. So it's a case of, it's going to get hard. So let's get good at that, and let's just make it work.
Yeah. And it's accounting for all eventualities too, right? So making sure that you're still going to, if you can still achieve success despite challenge, that's pretty damn awesome. I'm quite keen to open up the floor a little bit here, because we've got an Olympic gold medalist in our midst, and I'm sure that there are some questions out there that I haven't asked. So has anyone got any questions that they would love to know, any burning questions for Hamish? Yes, go for it.
So Hamish, from what I can get, what you're saying is that your motivation came from the small wins in your training rather than from trying to achieve a major goal. Would that be right?
Not quite. Where did my motivation come from? I think when I was a kid, I was, in sport, you got to see all these amazing athletes win on the world stage, which is like, how do they do that? Like, that's incredible. And we have all these businesses that win on the world stage. How do they do that? It's so freaking hard, but they do. And we're all lucky enough to live in New Zealand and go, we've got tons of examples where that's happened. And for me, that was a motivating factor. So what I did in sport, when I joined Xero, when I made Light Designs, these are all organisations which have got, they're local here, but they've got these amazing aspirations to achieve success on the world stage. And that takes a ton of courage and ambition, and you've got to overcome a lot of difficulties along the way, but essentially that's a fight worth having. So that for me was where a lot of the motivation came from. And what I care about now is that, wanting to make great places where people can thrive and be super ambitious, and it's going to be really uncomfortable. And so those things are kind of what motivate me now, but that's where I guess I started off as a young kid, and then as an athlete got my motivation from.
I'm going to jump in there and ask a quick question about community, because this is something that's quite dear to my heart, but we're a community here, Waikato Chamber and the business people in this room. I know that with young athletes and also I know you've had a lot of mentorship roles and things like that, what stuff are you teaching them and how are you helping them kind of build that community around themselves and support each other? Because I think that's quite important in sport.
Yeah, I think it's about having those connections. Again, it's really important to set yourself up for when things go wrong. So your relationships are really important. So treat people nice. Look after your mum and dad. You think they don't know much, but and it's just that those relationships are really strong when the time comes. And you may never need them. But it's just a really important part. There's a lot of research that a big part of resilience and bounce back comes down to the quality of your relationships. And when you don't have those connections and things get tough, you can suddenly get really, really isolated. And trying to build relationships in that mode is really, really hard. So again, it's a little bit of anticipating the challenges that might come along the way.
hearing through it, yeah.
Yeah.
I think I saw a hand over here when I cut in with my question. Did I? No? Maybe? All good? Yes?
You speak a lot about psychological safety and how that is a requirement to kind of really get to that successful point. How did you go from the position, you mentioned you weren't around the right people and you didn't have that space. How was that journey from not having that safety to a position where people felt safe to work around? Like, is there a set of values or a skills, or what was that experience like?
After Sydney, I don't know how it happened, but I didn't want to, but I think my coach got everyone together and we were trying to figure out what happened. And the funniest thing, it wasn't funny at the time, but the strengths coach was like, yeah, I sort of thought about 2 years out that this wasn't quite right, and then someone else was like, I had a hunch that, and we were like, why didn't you say something? And they're like, oh, because it looked like everything was going really well, and it was the point where you're going, well, that's why we had a theme around Get It Said, so we were like, let's say what we think, and we might be wrong, but, and at the time we didn't truly understand the principle, and I probably still don't fully grasp it, but I don't think you can just say, hey everyone, it's a safe environment. I think you've really got to think about how to do that, and so like a big part of that is if you can have personal connections, it's a good way to have safety because you know each other beyond just work. So trying to do some stuff like social events seem like they're just fun, but actually they're really, really important just to know other people and know their partners and know about their life, and so that stuff can sort of help. But I think there's definitely an area which I'm doing more reading on because I think it's like, how do you build that within a group of people? Yeah.
I think there's also a sense of to gain confidence first you must confide, so sometimes the leader actually has to take that first step. I think it's something that Wayne Smith said in his coaching as well, like if you share something that we've got and I mucked up, like this is what I did, and hey, if we're sharing that in the context of that was really difficult for me and I'm not the best, it kind of encourages other people to do the same, right?
Totally, and that's, I just thought of it, but to the other point, Alex, is vulnerability. So if you can find ways to be vulnerable with each other, it's not a load of rubbish. It actually does break down barriers, and people can feel like they can push way harder if they feel safe. But you've got to be able to say, I'm struggling, and I'm terrible at that, but we all are, well, New Zealanders in general are terrible at this. So it's like, this stuff matters. I think it's a really big part of, if you just did one thing, that might be something that could start building that trust and momentum in a different area.
Yeah, totally. Oh, Kate's like waving her hand around now.
Hi, Hamish.
Hi there.
Hi, I love what you've said about your commitment to continuous learning. And I'd love to know, do you have like a top book or podcast recommendation that we should all check out?
Great question.
I don't know. I flip between, okay, let me think. There's a really, well, it depends on what mode you're in. Like, I think you've got to seek out your own stuff. In fact, this is a personal responsibility play. You can't ask that question and have the answer given to you. I think it's up to you. That's the first thing. The second thing is there's a lot of amazing content, obviously, and there's a guy, CEO, he interviewed someone called Mo. What's his name? I can't.
Gawad?
Yeah, that's it.
Mo Gawad.
If you search that up and listen to that is phenomenal, really amazing. There's another amazing book by Claire, someone called...
Smash Demo to Smash Goals, that's me.
It's written, seriously, it's a serious topic. Claire, I can't remember her last name, not you, it's called Scaling People. And it's a book by, she's been executive at Google, and talks about what she now does with building effective teams. Now, a lot of it's quite process heavy, but there's also some amazing insights around some of the core practices that businesses apply. And it's on one hand it's quite common sense, but also on the other hand it's amazingly factual and based on empirical data around what matters to people in groups and working together. So I'd recommend that as well.
Claire Hughes Johnson.
Oh, thanks, Alex.
Much
That's
cooler
it.
name than me.
You recommended me.
I had a gentleman over here who's put up his hand 3 times. I'm sorry.
A couple of times anyway. Hey, some really interesting concepts for New Zealanders, some of those things that you're talking about. A couple of quick questions. One is, are you the manager of your team? So after Aussie, were you the manager of pulling all that together and analysing how your team operated? Or was your coach the manager?
Yeah, so that's another thing we realised in our debrief. And the debrief took 2 days and it was brutal. But we realised that we didn't know who was in charge. We were all doing our best and no one was really leading it. So we decided to put someone was in charge, and we tried that out, and then that didn't work. We tried someone else, and then so essentially, clear roles and responsibilities sounds a bit dry, but actually it's just a hugely important aspect of, what do I expect from you? What do you expect from me? Let's go. And then check in on that every now and then and see how it goes.
Cool. Sorry, the second part was, so you've got 3 disciplines, and it can be like the business world. So which ones do you work on? Do you work on your weakest ones, or do you get better at the ones that you're really good at? How do you go about that process?
I think you work on what you need to win. And obviously it doesn't matter how, or it does, but I guess you just got to find the right combination to make it work. And as an athlete, you've got to, prepare for different scenarios. Generally, the faster you swim, the slower you'll run. And if you run really fast, you're not a very good swimmer. And if you're a good cyclist, you're not really good at anything else. So, no, but seriously, you're the tug of war, and so you're always trying to balance it up. But the bottom line, and I would say, I think this is quite hard to do in business. Actually, I think it's actually really hard to do. But if you can figure out with total clarity what it's going to take to win, in whatever context you're in, if you can start there. Because if you don't start there, what are you working towards? But let's say you've got that, then and you kind of think, what is it? What does it mean to win? And so just think about that right now. Do you know? And does your team know? And are you all aligned to that? And it's an incredibly simple question, but it takes real thought and probably a bit of discomfort to figure it out. And I think a lot of the time we're really busy doing stuff, we're not necessarily clear on what it is we're trying to win. So that's the other thing we did after Sydney. We realised I didn't actually understand the event I was in, which sounds weird, but I didn't. And then we figured out, to win this race, I needed to do about 5 things in the swim, about 4 things on the bike, and about 5 things on the run. Very detailed, specific. If I could deliver those in a race, we'd probably win based on data and analysis and stuff. And so once we figured that out, we're like, oh yeah, that means I need to be able to do that in training about a month out. That means I need to be able to do that about a year out. So suddenly we had a trajectory to something which meant something. And we didn't have that in Sydney. So what's it going to take to win? If you don't know what that is, you got to go figure it out.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, I love it. Over on this side? Yep, you.
Hello Hamish, nice to have you here tonight.
Hi.
It was perfect timing actually. Did you know you were going to win before you started that race?
I don't know. Well, I had the whole goal setting thing, but I won't go into it. But the goal in Sydney was to win, which is the wrong goal because I was the wrong sort of person. The goal in Athens was to be on the start line and be the fittest person there. So I changed my focus onto something I could control. And you could argue you can't control how fit everyone else is, so how can you be the fittest person? But my preparation was of such a high standard, I felt like I was better prepared than anyone in the race. And then my goal was to deliver what I'd practiced. And I felt really comfortable with that. And then And so when I was about 100 metres to go, and I realised I was going to win the race, by then the goal was irrelevant. Sorry, no, the outcome was irrelevant. So I'd managed to separate myself and what I was doing from something that I really wanted. And a lot of the time, the things we really want, we can't necessarily affect. So you've got to almost separate your effort from the outcome. And that's really annoying too, because when you realise you can't control the outcome you want, it's stressful and uncomfortable. But you can't do anything about that, so you've got to find another way to focus on the stuff you can do to deliver it. And so it's just a separation of those two things.
The other part to that question, and it's sort of similar to what you're talking about, did you then deliver on that race plan? Obviously you got the goal and the result, but did you deliver to that race plan?
Yeah.
Was it slightly better?
Yeah, that's a great one. This is awesome, actually. I just realised something. I don't want to lose my train of thought here. When I was at High Performance Sport, I was lucky enough to, we interviewed, but we spent a lot of time with all the medal-winning campaigns. We got to sit down with them, ask them questions. Why did you win? What was the key to your success? Big things emerged, like I'm talking about today. All the same stuff you'd imagine. It was messy. They had a great goal-setting mantra. They were focusing on what they control. They had high trust. Everyone had clear roles and responsibilities. Really strong lens on learning. All the things which I've talked about. What was really interesting was that we didn't have a direct ratio, but we came up with a theme that we said if you can deliver 80% of your plan to a high standard, that's enough. And what I mean by that is that you don't have to, it's not that you can or should almost, 100% is almost not achievable. So in my race, a lot of things went wrong. But I was prepared enough that despite things going wrong, I could still win. There's a really cool, actually that's a diversion, I won't go down that track. So my point is
We're
that,
here for this.
yeah, my point I'm trying to make is you do some planning, don't expect it to go perfectly. In fact, you should prepare that it won't go perfectly. And if you can deliver it of a high standard, most of it, that should be enough to win. And so I think that's a really important distinction, because if we think that you've got to be perfect every day, it's completely unrealistic. And there's so many things that are going to come along and bump you off course. So a great saying I love is the plan needs to be as good as it needs to be to get the job done. And that kind of is a counter to what I've been talking about, but essentially it's some balance to the space and the uncertainty in which we operate.
Hi, Hamish. One thing that you mentioned before when you came back from Sydney, how a reporter came up to you, asked you, pretty rude question, as many people do. One thing that I think that comes to mind is like tall poppy syndrome in New Zealand. Now I know there's been a lot of Kiwi athletes that have brought this topic up. Have you yourself faced a bit of that, and how have you dealt with it?
I don't know. I actually think I think our tall poppy syndrome is just that we have really high standards, and we have high expectations to succeed. And when we don't succeed, it sucks, and everyone really gets annoyed. And most of our tall poppy syndrome is just a handful of journalists, so it's not really reflective of the country. And actually, when someone is really horrible or asks a stupid question, I just think it's fuel to do it better. And I just reckon it's another opportunity to learn and grow from it. Because, I don't know, I think if there was something called tall poppy syndrome, you could argue they're really just doing that because they care, and they just gutted that you didn't do it, but they're just going to take it out and ask you a dumb question. So, I don't know, I just think about it differently.
That is the greatest example ever of taking feedback positively. Christian?
Hamish, have you ever experienced burnout, and do you have any tips for it?
Yeah, definitely. Burnout What's the tips? I don't know. Listen to your own advice sometimes, for God's sake. No, I think that's just having those good people around you that can tell you, take a break, it's okay, stop trying to be amazing at everything. Listening to those people is good. But I think the number one thing is trust. So trust is really important to succeed, but it's the trust component is trust in you, in yourself. And so I think you've got to hear what your little voice is saying, figure out what do you need to be, what does it look like if you're operating at your optimal level? Now, that's going to be stuff like, it's not going to be, well, it could be a range of things, but for me, I've definitely got to get a run at least 3 times a week. I've definitely got to, what else? I've got to either go for a surf or, so exercise is really important. So if I miss that for too many days in a row, I know that I'm going to be less effective, and then I'm going to get into a place where I'm not the best person. So I think it's just figuring those things out. And in the book I talked about, Claire does this crazy analysis of what she needs to be at her best. It goes a little bit far, but it's an awesome example of identifying the things you need to be as effective as possible, and just trying to put those things in place more regularly. And a lot of people here won't have thought about that, I'm assuming. Might be a bit presumptuous, but if you haven't thought about what you need to be at your best, go away and think about it, and make sure most of the time you're doing those things. Because that's when we fall over, and then we look back and we think, of course I broke down. I was living this life which is completely unsustainable.
I think we've got time for probably one more question.
Just on that, Hamish, what are the signs of burnout, and what would be the signs that you would see in others, in your staff or whatever, of burnout?
Yeah, that's easy. If you meet 3 bastards before lunchtime, you're burning out. And I know it's a bit simple, but if you're just coming across angry people, you've got to go, wait a second, what's going on here? It's not exact science, but you know what I mean. If you're driving to work and you think, and someone cuts in front of you, it's not a big deal, really. Is it that big a deal? I mean, you've got to find that balance, but yeah, so that would be one way to, you can apply that lens. I'm not sure that'll work.
Maybe one more? Saw a couple more hands. Yeah. Tony?
Visualization is a component of sporting success. How have you translated that into the business world?
I haven't actually. I guess it's less about visualization for me. I don't know if I purposely do that. I did a lot of visualization as an athlete, and it took me in the wrong direction. It didn't help me be effective, but I know visualization can work for lots of people. Another way, actually, better way to answer that is, I think in the sphere of learning, making time for reflection is hugely important. It's maybe that's visualization, I don't know, but you know, if you can even just create a session at work where you just stop and people go, you can't do anything, I just want you to reflect for half an hour and let's see what you come up with. Actually, you'll be amazed at what people come forward with. But when you're busy, you can't kind of cut through the noise and get to the clarity sometimes. So having a break and some time to think, or even just in a small group, discussing a topic, coming up with some ideas, bringing it back. We do this at work. Probably do it too much sometimes, and everyone's used to it. But the point is, it's about reflection and discussion and creating ideas together, and it gives you energy. You feel awesome. So don't know if that's visualization, but that's how I would put it. Yeah.
Lucky last.
How aware Hamish, were you of your competitors when you were leading up to a competition in order to beat them? Were you learning and studying them, or were you just totally focused on your prep and your game plan in order to beat them?
Yeah, I learned that in Sydney, I was hyper-focused on everything else other than myself. So I was massively distracted. So it was my coach's role in Athens to do that thinking. And that allowed me to just focusing on what I need to do. Again, really important that we identified that because it became a huge amount of emotional, exhaustion or something like that. You're tying up your emotional energy with seeing what everyone else is doing, and it's a distraction. So I think you've got to figure out if that works for you, that's great, but if it distracts you from what you should be doing, then you've got to find either someone else that can do it, or be able to manage it so it doesn't take over, because generally our brains are wired to ruminate on things that present risks or threats that don't ever come true, so we're not very good at that, at switching that off.
Yeah, totally. I'm going to leave it there and say a huge thank you. Hamish has now spoken for like nearly 50 minutes, so really appreciate it.
Running over.
No, it's great. We love it. The insights have been incredible, and I think what I've got out of today is that it's actually really simple to get to high performance, but it's also having that kind of hyper focus, focusing on what you're doing, what you can control. But then when we kind of reflect it and bring it back into that team space or maybe into the business space, it's actually about making sure that everyone knows what their job is and how to achieve a very clear vision. And I know that I'm going to take a little bit of that back to my business and say, actually, what are we trying to achieve and who is doing the roles and who is best suited to that. So thank you for that reflection. It's amazing. And it's just, it really is amazing to have you in our midst. So thank you very much. I'm going to hand over to Bex now, who's just going to say a few words and thank our sponsors. I want to do a quick shout out actually to Wild River & Co, who is our sponsor of the speaker gift, because I have now done my florist, and they've done an incredible job of some gifts for me recently. So I just wanted to say please support them, because they are supporting this incredible event to happen every month.
Yes, well, thank you to Wild River for this fantastic gift, and their flowers are pretty cool, actually.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Hamish. I'm always surprised by how inspiring these events are, but the name of them is Inspire, so I probably shouldn't be. I reckon Hamish's challenge to you tomorrow is to go into work and ask your team, what does it take for us to win, and figure out how you're going to do that, because that's what I'm doing with my team tomorrow. Thank you so much, Hamish, and thank you to our event sponsor, VCE. We couldn't do this event without you. Amazing, thank you to our host, Claire. You do an amazing job. But I actually want to take a moment to recognise Claire, because last night she won an award, which she should be very proud of. So Claire was named Emerging Leader at the Primary Industry Awards. So can we have a round of applause for that? We're very lucky to have her with us doing this. And also I want to say thank you to our catering sponsor, Zenders, Hazel Hayes, who are based at Zenders. They've got a really cool event. You'll see some of you put it on the chair. It's these really cool dinner and show nights, and it's every weekend in July and August. And you can book it out and take your friends and go along and choose a show and have some dinner, and it looks really fun. So have a look at that and check that one out. The next Inspire is going to be taking place on the 7th of August. We'll be joined by a panel of Waikato CEOs to discuss visionary leadership to inspire successful organisations. So we'll be joined by Elizabeth Jacobs, who's the CEO of Gallagher Animal Management and who was named our CEO of the Year last year at the Waikato Business Awards. We'll also be joined by Fiona Michelle from Braemar Hospital and John Calder from Tompkins Wake. So that's on our website if you want to register, and we look forward to seeing you all there. Have a good night.